An urgent update for Ireland. So please forward and send to your politicians, business leaders, journalists, so they actually grasp what's going on. So Ireland's heading into more lockdown madness now, coming into January. And I thought I'd just show you the actual data and what's really going on. All from the databases, Irish government, and from records from health authorities. So nothing funny here, just data, but it tells a story. So we know that Ireland, this is Euromomo all-cause mortality. We got the blip back in April for sure. Our overall all-cause mortality for the year is no different than prior years. And we can see the last couple of months here, Ireland is actually running low on mortality. So there's no epidemic in terms of mortality for sure. But we've also got to acknowledge that there's a huge amount of lockdown happening because of cases and PCR positives. But let's just look and see that in prior years in the winter we're always overloaded in beds, but due to influenza rather than SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 this year has replaced influenza. But all this bed loading and 500 or 600 trolleys generally in the winter, we've only got around 160 trolleys now. So we are not overloaded at all. And we've only got 7 or 8 people per million people in Ireland in ICU. So what's happening? In terms of the flu being gone, people say maybe the masks and the lockdowns, but that's not it. The flu has disappeared pretty much all over the world, whether you have lockdown or not lockdown, whether you have masks or not. It's disappeared everywhere. And the reason can be understood from a book like this, from the genius Dr. Edgar Hope Simpson, who studied influenza transmission for over 50 years, set up the first laboratory in England in the 30s. And you can get it at this link or in the description below. But it's called in virology the disappearing trick or the vanishing trick. And it's well documented when new viruses come in that are very dominant, that often there's competitiveness in the host of the viruses, and other ones basically deactivate. They drop off the map. So we see no flu this year, so everything we're seeing is the new kid in town, SARS-CoV-2, that's coming up positive in PCRs. So let's look closer. Here's 2018 in Ireland, and the blue bars here are the hospital beds taken up with respiratory, mainly influenza back then. The line is the percentage positive for influenza or other viruses, and it's nearly 70%. So pretty much these blue hospital bed bars are dominated by influenza. Now from the 1st of September, we'll look at SARS-CoV-2 hospital beds. And here's the trend. So remember, the blue bars are 2018, mainly influenza-driven hospital beds, respiratory, okay. And this red line is right up to date as of New Year's Day. It's the trend for SARS-CoV-2 positive hospital beds, right? And you can see it almost matches 2018. So, as we said, SARS-CoV-2 has knocked influenza out, so it's basically replacing. But there's nothing really different than 2018 happening here. That's an important point to note. Now I'm going to have to talk about fraud, I'm afraid, because the data is being used lately in a fraudulent manner, in my mind. Let me explain. So here we have the PCR SARS-CoV-2 positive test rate, trend. And here we have confirmed cases in hospital. Now remember, these are positive in the PCR test. They are not necessarily in hospital because of COVID or SARS-CoV-2. They are people who are badged with PCR. Some of them are valid, some of them are not. And similarly for ICU, the trend is people who have positive PCR, not necessarily driven into the ICU by COVID. But in any case, here on the 17th of October, the positive rate in the testing curled over, clearly. But the level 5 lockdown only came into effect here for positivity. And as you can see, nothing changed in the curve. So the level 5 lockdown that lost 100,000 jobs, right, and ran for 5 or 6 weeks, actually did nothing to the curve of positivity. That's clear. In hospitalisation, the hospitalisations curled over, 21st October, and the level 5 lockdown would have acted on these around here. Again, no effect on the curve. ICU is pretty flat anyway, so there's not much to see there. Level 5 went back to level 3, 1st to 4th of December, and as you can see, for 12 or 13 days nothing happened. But the test positivity should have started going up there, but it didn't. But let's look further. We'll look at what happened since mid-December. And we see the test positivity has gone through the roof. Now, that could be because the SARS-CoV-2 virus is rising seasonally, and it could be because the people testing are less testing the population and more mining and testing repeatedly in hospitals and those arenas, and then getting much higher positive rates. So it could be many things, but let's look at what gives us the answer. So the hospitalizations, if this was really an increase in SARS and was going to impact people's health, then a couple of weeks later you get a commensurate rise in hospitalizations after incubation and after, getting ill and then having to go to the hospital. So there'd be a delay. But this is actually what happened. And in ICU, it would be even further out that a rise in positives would result in ICU level, which would be later on. But this is what is in the government data. So if you look closely here, they are in lockstep. And the only way that can happen is that these hospitalizations are being created out of thin air by getting more and more positive PCRs in the hospital setting and instantly creating hospitalizations for COVID. And even more hilariously, the ICU suddenly rises from the moment, pretty much, that the test positivity is rising fast. The ICU matches it. So this basically is an absurd situation which indicates, among other things, that the test concentration may now be in the hospital setting and less in the population, because this makes no sense otherwise unless someone else can give an explanation. So anyone who doesn't understand this, please re-watch it and think about it. Instantly, when positivity rate in PCR goes up, instantly the hospitalizations go up, and instantly the ICU goes up, right, with no lag. There's only one or two possibilities for that, and none of them justify the dreadful lockdown that's just been put in again to further ruin our society, as if it wasn't ruined enough already, right? And this, to me, regardless of what happens in the coming weeks, is tantamount to fraudulent use of data. Fraudulent use of data to terrify a population and to put in draconian lockdown measures with known dreadfully damaging effects in the absence of genuine impact being present. Okay? So I'd suggest you send this to your politicians, hopefully they can understand it, and to your other leaders and influencers and reporters. Hopefully they are numerate enough to follow this. And let's get this out there and let's get it shared, right? So everyone kind of knows what's going on with the data. Because not knowing the data means you're a subject to being fooled. Now, with that in mind, let's finish with all-cause mortality in Ireland this year of 2020. So I put out a quiz today, New Year's Day, and I asked, which year is 2020? These are the first 8 or 9 months, January to September, of 4 different years. One of them is 2020, and it's the all-cause mortality per 1,000 population, right? Can you pick out 2020? Now, we know lockdowns do very little for all-cause mortality. That's proven in around 25 papers. We've gone through those before, right? And the masks were after the event, also in any case. So which year is 2020? Well, here it is. I've mixed up the months and I've put April here and I've left January of 2017 and 18 where they are. But either way, 2020 cannot be distinguished. So it will not be in any way a remarkable mortality year. And 2019 was low mortality relatively, which should have made 2020 higher, but it still wasn't. So keep that in mind. Here's the bigger picture. So here's 2020, showing April in its proper place. Again, April no worse than January in 2017 or 2018, and generally trending low for mortality in recent months, also. So there you have it. Nothing coming up in the data. Just looking at the overall mortality for the year, and 2020 ain't really going to change now. There you have it. And again, the low mortality 19 should have technically made this pop up, because there would have been a build-up of susceptible or aged or frail people. But even with that, it can't even beat prior years, 3 prior years. So that's the actual data and the reality in Ireland. And just a reminder that I do need support to continue putting together all of this content. And at patreon.com/Ivor Cummins, or for PayPal, please see the description below this video or the pinned comment, and you can do a one-off or a monthly support. So I'd really appreciate that, guys, and keep me getting the science out there and countering perhaps the more biased corporate type science. Thank you.